offenses coming in, different coordinators coming in, different head coaches coming in and out. This franchise thought enough of him. He made enough an impression in those early years that they sort of refused to let him go, and they kept giving him better jobs and sort of slowly moving up the chain till where finally he was an offensive coordinator and then now a head coach of another team. They couldn't keep him from going to another team, but they could try to keep him from taking another job, a sideways move or something like that. So I'm very, very happy for him. I always enjoyed work with him. Always enjoyed talking to him. He's not a coach that is a yeller and a screamer. He's very pragmatic. He's very common sense. I think that's why, sometimes the smartest people are the most common sense also. And I think, Kevin's that way. He seems to get along with every person in the building, whether it's coaches or players that he's ever been around. I've never heard anybody ever say anything bad about him. So we'll see how he does the head coach. Matt LaFleur, I thought, was the Packers head coach, similar. Not a big rah-rah guy, not a, Mike Tomlin. He walks in the room and you just sort of takes over the room with his grand presence. Some coaches sort of have that. Bill Parcells and Belichick probably has, even though he's not a big rah-rah guy, he has this sort of stoic ability about him to sort of command a room. Kevin, I think, he earns respect for players by how he treats people and by how he knows the details of football. And I think he did a really, really good job this past year with it. Really is true his first year as an offensive coordinator. I thought he brought out the best in Kirk Cousins and a lot of other players. And I think that's the reason he got this opportunity. And he's going to have, his hands full in that franchise. I mean, no one's won there for ever, right? I don't. When was the last time they were in the playoffs? Was it like Butch Davis era?
Yeah, I think that was the Kelly Holcomb game where they blew it to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Was the last time that they were in the playoffs? Yeah,
he threw for like 400 yards in the snow or something, and that was early 2000s, I believe, 2002.
Yeah, they had
something.
A Derek Anderson 10-6 season mixed in there, but they didn't make the playoffs.
But one of the more passionate franchises, historic franchises in a lot of ways. But they just haven't had success. So they have a sort of a wild card at quarterback, a guy who's very talented. He's got a heck of an arm. In some ways reminds you of Favre. In some ways reminds you of Johnny Manziel. I mean, he's sort of in between sometimes. And so they got Odell Beckham at wide receiver. I love their running backs. What he does with Chubb and Kareem Hunt from Kansas City. What he does with those two guys, if they're both the running backs next year. I mean, I imagine what he did with Dalvin Cook was phenomenal this year. And so he's got his hands full, and I wish him best of the luck. And I'm glad the Vikings don't have to play him every year, because I bet his teams are well coached and disciplined and play quality football.
I was thinking about how funny life is, because at the Combine after the 2017 season, we asked Mike Zimmer, hey, so why aren't you letting Kevin Stefanski go interview for the offensive coordinator job in New York with Pat Shurmur? And Zimmer went on a big rant about loyalty and all these things, and how, he didn't fire Stefanski when he got here. And it was sort of like stunning to hear. And I'm sure that Kevin was upset after that he was probably crushed that he couldn't go be an offensive coordinator with his buddy Pat Shurmur and everything else. If he had gone there, he'd be looking for a job today, because that's a terrible situation with a team that was fading with an older quarterback. And then they draft a running back, as you do when you're trying to rebuild an organization. And he ends up staying here, being patient through the DiFilippo nonsense. Another guy who got fired today, by the way, again. And he eventually has it work out for him. And as you mentioned, Cousins has the best year of his career, which is probably what they're hoping for in Cleveland with Baker Mayfield. I think Cousins is a little more mature than Baker Mayfield, so that's going to be a tough task to get him to maybe stop tweeting and fighting people on Twitter and maybe just focus on being the front face of an NFL organization. I don't think it's an easy task, but the talent is there, and I think if he brings a more mature and disciplined approach, that those guys might want that instead of having a guy like Freddie who seemed to want to be their buddy.
I got a feeling that when Kevin Stefanski was 16 years old, he was an adult, like a legit, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and Freddie Kitchens is still 15 years old, not an adult or something.
Yeah.
He's going to be the opposite from a maturity standpoint. And, but by the way, great life lesson there for all the listeners out there who are working or who are doing whatever they're doing. Kevin wanted this job with the Giants. I imagine I haven't talked to him really about that, but he wanted to go to be Pat Shermer's offensive coordinator, move up from quarterbacks coach to coordinator, and he had that climb. He doesn't get the job. He can't control it. It's like one of those things in life you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than being a complainer or being like, I'm going to be sort of the I got sort of screwed over, so I'm going to be like not a great sort of teammate type of thing. He just goes back to work. He doesn't complain. You never hear anything really about it after that. It goes away, and then just is patient and controls what he can control, and slowly works his way back up and gets that coordinator job at the end of that season, and then this past season, and now he's a head coach in a better situation. He's not a head coach if he was the Giants coordinator the last couple of years.
No question about it.
Right. I'm fairly sure. I mean,
Yep.
Unless somehow he magically would have changed everything,
Nope.
it still would have been, the thing is, it still would have been Pat Shermer, really the coordinator, and Kevin quasi coordinator. Like we all know that deal. So even if they would have done well, it wouldn't have been necessarily because of Kevin, it would be because of Pat. Right. So this situation, defensive head coach, he really was the head coach of the offense. And I know when he got this job this last year, when Gary Kubiak got hired, and then he hired Rick Dennison and a couple other guys, and Clint Kubiak, who he said that he wanted to hire anyway because Clint Kubiak had been here before as a quality control coach.
Yeah, that's right.
And he literally said, I wanted to hire Clint anyway because they got along so well. And that the style, when he became coordinator, really for the first time, he told me, he goes, I always wanted to run the sort of that zone play action bootleg style because it's consistently good. Quarterbacks consistently play well in it. It wins a lot of football games. It makes the most of your running backs. It helps out the O-line to not pass protecting all the time. And he really thought that system was what he wanted to run, but he'd never really been in it. Football coaching a lot of times is like trying to copy what other teams are doing. They're doing something different and really, really well. And everyone would like to have what the Saints are doing or what the Chiefs are doing right now. But so everyone tries to go and try to copy all these things. Well, unless you have actual firsthand knowledge in the aspect of like a Gary Kubiak and Rick Dennison, like decades of firsthand knowledge of why they run the ball this way and what are their calls and what's their technique and all these little details, you just don't know them as well. And so when he got the job, for those guys to come in, also got hired, I think he was, I'll tell you straight up, I talked to him, he was ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
He was ecstatic when he had a chance to actually have like the teacher of the offense that he wanted to. I mean, it was a perfect scenario for him. And I thought he did a really good job. Him and Gary Kubiak, two guys without big egos, working together to make this thing go as far as it can go. And I thought they did a fantastic job this year.
And when he goes to Cleveland, he'll have to work with a lot of other people as well. So if you're one of those people who wants to control everything and do it exactly your way, which I'm not saying for sure that was John DeFilippo, but I might be saying that, then usually it doesn't